Well, a mountain climber accused of leaving his girlfriend to die on Austria's highest peak has been found guilty of manslaughter. Thomas Plamberger abandoned Kerstin Gurtner in extreme cold after the couple ran into trouble near the summit in January 2025. She later froze to death. Eerie webcam footage appears to show the pair scaling the mountain before Plamberger descended alone.
Just over a year ago at 6:45 a.m. on the 18th of January, 36-year-old veteran alpinist Thomas Plamberger and his 33-year-old girlfriend Kerstin, by the way, this is her, climbed Austria's Grossglockner, which rises 3,798 meters in the Hohe Tauern range in Austria. The couple started climbing in sunshine and were scheduled to reach the summit at 9 p.m. that night. Grossglockner is Austria's highest mountain. The climb is considered to be one of the most demanding winter ascents in the Alps. Barely 20 hours after starting out that day, Kerstin was dead.
I got nightmares in my head, I feel thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I feel.
The events that played out that cruel, fateful night are briefly as follows. According to the New York Times, Mr. Plamberger said during the hike that his girlfriend had become exhausted near the summit on their hike and that the couple had decided he would descend the mountain to get help while she stayed. According to the Independent, Austrian media reported that wind speeds reached about 74 kilometers per hour, that's about 45.9 miles per hour, and temperatures dropped to around minus 8 degrees Celsius, that's about 17 degrees Fahrenheit, but with wind chill making it feel closer to minus 20 Celsius or minus 4 Fahrenheit. Rescue workers later told the court that when they recovered Kerstin's body, she was still wearing a rucksack, her gloves were off, and her boots open. Also, the fluid in their thermos was, I think, frozen. Now, besides all that, searchers found Kerstin hanging from a rope about 50 meters from the stormy summit. Meanwhile, Thomas had descended on his own, supposedly at the behest of Kerstin, who, he said, had dramatically and valiantly told him to save himself. But there were a lot of shaky details surrounding Thomas's account after the fact. Why had he turned off his phone? Why hadn't he taken any of the gear out of Kerstin's backpack and prepared a bivvy for his girlfriend? Why, when he finally called for an emergency, did he not make clear that they actually needed rescuing? According to the Independent, he also failed to answer calls back or WhatsApp messages asking if they needed help. Now, what also makes this case extraordinary, besides mountain rescue choppers actually being in the area, was that the whole incident was caught on a webcam. Since the climbers wore headlights, it was easy to see where they were on the mountain in the dark. All of this evidence led to something exceedingly rare, but perhaps overdue in mountaineering, a trial. In this case, did Thomas show the appropriate duty of care to a fellow climber? Now, those who know me know that I wrote a series of books on the 96 Everest disaster, and I approached that narrative from a true crime perspective, examining what we do in true crime, but in terms of the 96 Everest disaster, the timeline, the true identities of the people involved, the evidence, statement analysis, motive, circumstantial evidence, context, and also medical history. Well, we can also bring that to bear in this case. According to the New York Times, around 15 witnesses and experts were called during the trial that happened in Innsbruck, including members of Mr. Plamberger's family, rescue workers, law enforcement officers, and Ms. Gurtner's mother, Gurtner, who said that she did not believe Mr. Plamberger was responsible for her daughter's death. The Grossglockner affair provides a fascinating portrait of what a mountaineer on trial could look like, what it really involves, especially since the judge in this case, Norbert Hofer, is also an experienced climber. In fact, he's an emergency mountain rescuer, and he obviously knows his stuff. Although the case made world headlines across a number of media, just have a look at some of these headlines all over the world, the New York Times, I thought, provided one of the most salient and detailed reviews of the fact. According to the New York Times, the case hinged on a concept in Germanic law known as Garantenstellung. It establishes a responsibility to intervene for people who have a duty of care in a range of situations, including parents caring for children or a driver who hits a pedestrian, and it can put liability on those people. Now think about that. Parents caring for children is a concept that we could apply to other famous cases, such as John Benet Ramsey, Madeleine McCann, Kaylee Anthony, and Gus Lamont. And in terms of drivers hitting pedestrians, the Karen Reed case comes to mind. According to the New York Times, the prosecution argued that Mr. Plamberger was more experienced than Ms. Gurtner, whom he had been dating for about a year and was therefore responsible for her on the trip. The defense argued that they were both experienced and had both planned the trip. One could also argue that when you climb a mountain, it's every man or woman for himself, and each one takes the risk, and when they do that, they take responsibility effectively for themselves, and they absolve responsibility effectively for others to take care of them. My personal view is if it's in the capacity of a person to help another person in an emergency, they should do so. In this case, it turns out Plamberger didn't even seem to meet the minimum threshold of care, although he did eventually call the emergency number. Confoundingly, maddeningly, he didn't seem to express what had happened as an emergency. According to the New York Times, during the trial on Thursday, Judge Hohe, who is also an emergency mountain rescuer, criticized Mr. Plamberger for not communicating with the police that his girlfriend could no longer continue and for not taking steps to protect her. My partner can't continue was not communicated. That is the most fundamental information, Judge Hofe said. Then the strategy changes. A position sheltered from wind, take out blankets. As a mountaineer, you must know that. And of course, Plamberger didn't do that either. According to the New York Times, a dramatic turn came late in the trial when a surprise witness, Andrea Bergener, an ex-girlfriend of Mr. Plamberger's, testified that Mr. Plamberger had left her alone on a night hike on that same mountain on Grossglockner a few years earlier. Once we descended the Glockner at night, suddenly he was gone, she said. I felt dizzy, I screamed, but I was completely alone. From then on, we didn't go on any more hikes together. I do suspect something similar happened in January last year with Kerstin on Grossglockner. According to the New York Times, Plamberger said that they'd run into serious trouble only at about 8:15 p.m. when Gurtner slipped, and we do need to really look at the timeline in more detail. He said they had soldiered on and not made any distress call to the helicopter at 10:30 p.m. because Gurtner's condition still appeared to be manageable. However, she collapsed not long after that, Plamberger told the court. Well, if she collapsed not long after that, why didn't you make a call then when she collapsed? And who do you think was pushing who to soldier on? What is also peculiar in this case is Kerstin's cell phone data. According to the Times, the court was told that shortly after 5 p.m. on the day of the climb, Gurtner had tried to ring the number 149, which is one digit away from the Austrian mountain rescue number, which is 140. At 6:07 p.m., she was then said to have sent her parents a cryptic text message suggesting that the climb was already over and they had descended to safety. So maybe what she had decided was they were going to turn around, and then he perhaps convinced her to do otherwise. And this also suggests that there's a lot more wrong with Plamberger's version of events than meets the eye, doesn't it? According to the Times, the British newspaper, the judge also said that Gurtner's body had been found in a different location from where Plamberger claimed to have left her, suggesting that she had fallen down a vertical rock face. There were also additional inconsistencies. According to CNN, rescue services made several unsuccessful attempts to contact the defendant before receiving a first phone call from him at 12:35 a.m. on January 19. Now, if you think about the timeline, that phone call took him 4 hours to make, since by his own acknowledgement, they got into serious trouble at 8:15 p.m. So what were you doing for 4 hours until midnight? Another thing that's quite hinky in this case is whether he even raised the alarm. The authorities say whether he raised the alarm during this phone call made just after midnight is also unclear. According to the defendant's lawyer, he did not immediately notice the missed calls from the authorities, from the mountaineering authorities, because his mobile only vibrated slightly. He noticed them when he took out his phone to arrange for a helicopter rescue after his girlfriend's condition had worsened, Jelinek said, citing the defendant's statement to the Innsbruck Public Prosecutor's Office. According to the lawyer, his client said during the 12:35 a.m. call they were in need of help as soon as possible. Now, it does seem bizarre that in an emergency where they were probably stuck in place for minutes, perhaps even hours at a time, why wouldn't you look at your phone? What else would there be to do? Also, he didn't make a bivvy for it either, so what was he doing during that time? Also, it's not as though he didn't do anything to his phone. He literally seemed to place it on silent. Now, when I researched the 96 Everest disaster, I quickly learned that the accounts provided by various individuals often got murky and inconsistent, especially when you were dealing with crucial areas where a certain individual that was left alone died. Well, suddenly you're getting very vague in your storytelling about that. Those who know the story know that many ended up blaming the real hero of the story, Anatoly Bokriev, when he was actually the one who did most of the heavy lifting and saved the most lives. And I suppose in that particular case, no one expected the Russian, who could barely speak English, to hire someone to set the record straight in his own book, The Climb, by Weston DeVault. I've actually had direct dealings with that author, including when I wrote my own series of books. Now, the point is, if you're going to abandon a climb on a mountain, and if you genuinely think it's the right thing to do, and the best thing to do, be honest about it. That is the true test about whether one could or couldn't show a duty of care. And if you can't be honest about it, well, then you probably do have something to hide. You probably did do something wrong. And in this case, I'm not sure Plamberger has been entirely honest. Often the point of climbing mountains is to glorify oneself and for an ego boost. Failure and admitting it, someone actually dying, which is the worst case scenario, runs counter to what some of these people are trying to achieve to begin with, and they just can't bring themselves to tell the truth about it. According to the New York Times, in the end, the judge found Mr. Plamberger was largely responsible for Ms. Gurtner, saying that his mountaineering skills were galaxies away from hers and faulting him for not recognizing and understanding her abilities. The judge also said, "You are an excellent alpinist, but you're also someone who finds it very difficult to make the switch between your own limits and those of others." We also need to talk about what Plamberger does for a living. He's a chef, and chefs are often rated high on the chart for psychopathy. This also smacks of an egotistical fellow who, as the judge says, knows full well how to take care of his own needs, but is a horrible guide. Curiously, in this case, the parents of the dead woman, Kerstin Gurtner, have been squarely behind Plamberger, saying, according to the Times, the mother, who you'd think would know her daughter very well, said that her daughter was a strong-willed woman who knew exactly what she was getting into. Plamberger's lawyer also read out a letter from Gurtner's parents that said, "Our daughter took responsibility for herself. We cannot fault her boyfriend. She had done mountain running and conquered much more difficult peaks than this one." But the judge felt differently, and I have to say, so do I. According to CNN, Kerstin's body was found by Alpine rescuers around 10 a.m. on January 19th, according to the defendant's lawyer. According to the Times, a police officer who investigated the case told the court that when he asked Plamberger whether he had served as Gurtner's courtesy tour guide and planned the climb, Plamberger had effectively said yes. In addition, a medical examination found that Gurtner had been suffering from a viral infection and hypothermia, which were factors in her death. And so the Innsbruck court that heard the case ultimately found Plamberger guilty of manslaughter. He was sentenced to 5 months of imprisonment, which was suspended for 3 years, and ordered to pay a fine of €9,600, which is about £8,400, or $11,300. I'm not going to take it further than that, but I do want to ask you, do you sometimes think that we have a duty of care to our fellow human beings just in ordinary situations? And have you ever seen people either failing to answer that call or honoring that call? I remember when I was a little boy, me and my brother actually once went out, we were strong swimmers, and rescued a small little 8-year-old girl that was being washed out to sea. Can you think of any instances where you exerted yourself in terms of a duty of care to a complete stranger? Well, it would certainly be interesting to hear your stories as well. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.